What is going on, my fellow navigators, and welcome back to another video. As of today, we are 1 week away from the release of Champions Path. And in celebration of that, I thought a fun video and a fun discussion for today would be to try and predict which Charizard from Champions Path I think is going to be more valuable. Is it going to be the hyper rare Charizard V-MAX, or is it going to be the shiny Charizard V? And that's where I'd like to take our discussion here today and go over a few characteristics that I've been looking at in coming up with my prediction, and just kind of give you guys my take on which Charizard I think is going to be more valuable. But before we jump into those predictions, guys, go ahead and do me a favor. Give me that double slap attack, one for that like button, one for that subscribe button. And if you want to be notified each and every time a video drops on the channel, go ahead and thunder punch that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. And with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into these predictions. And I thought a good place to start would be to look back in the past at other cards that are very similar to the Charizards that we are receiving in Champions Path. And we'll go ahead and start things off with the hyper rare Charizard GX from Burning Shadows. Now, as you guys know, Burning Shadows was released back in 2017, and the Hyper Rare Charizard GX, that was the big chase card for that set. Very similar to the Hyper Rare Charizard V-MAX that we're getting in Champions Path. Now, upon its initial release, that card was going for around $250, which was quite a lot, honestly. I mean, since I had gotten back into the hobby in 2016, that was really, at that time, probably one of the most valuable cards that I had seen, and the craze was pretty incredible, to be honest. So in its initial release, it was about $250. Now, after a period of time, that card eventually settled to around $150. So, you know, as with any card, and this is something that I want to make a point of here first and foremost, guys, when Champions Path is released and when you start seeing these cards come out onto the open market, don't be that guy or that girl that goes out and purchases these cards at this high premium. It happens every single time a new set is released. When there's a lot of hype around a particular chase card, especially when it's a Charizard, there is going to be an extremely high premium on those first cards that are released, because, you know, the seller knows that they basically are running the market. You know, it's a very limited supply at that point, and they know that they can charge a high premium. So do yourself a favor. Do not fall victim to that. Don't jump in there at those high premiums. And I'll get into what I think these cards for Champions Path are going to be going for on their initial release, and other characteristics as well. But for the Hyper Rare Charizard GX, its initial release, it was going for about $250 on the open market. Eventually, it settled to $150. Now, looking online, this card, just in its raw form, is going for about $300 to $400, which, you know, is a pretty nice little increase there, you know, from its initial release back in 2017 until now, you know, going for, you know, from about $150 where it settled to about that $300 to $400 range. Now, on the other hand, in a PSA 10, I was actually really surprised to come across this, because I haven't been looking at this particular card in quite some time, and I was very surprised to find that this card has been selling in a PSA 10 for anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500. And I know that's a pretty big difference there, but as you know, markets are going to fluctuate quite a lot on individual cards, something that I've talked about in the past in previous videos. So you got about $1,000 swing there of what this card is actually selling for on the open market. The next card that we'll go ahead and use for our comparison, and you probably guessed it already, is the shiny Charizard GX from Hidden Fates. So upon its initial release, this card was going for about $500. This was a big chase card. As you guys know, I mean, I've talked extensively about Hidden Fates and just how great a set that was overall, but this was a huge chase card. Everybody was going after this shiny Charizard GX, and so therefore it fetched a really high premium upon its initial release. As I said, going for about $500 at that time. As you know, Hidden Fates was released late last year. I believe it was in August of last year, so 2019. But then after a while, after a few months, 3, 4, 5 months, that card eventually settled to around $400. And now if you look online in its raw form, so ungraded, this particular card is going for about $700 to $800. So it has seen a really nice increase in value in a relatively short period of time. And then in a PSA 10, you can pick up this card, or what it's actually been selling for is around $1,300 to $1,500. And you may be asking yourself, well, man, why is this shiny Charizard going for less than the hyper rare Charizard GX? And I think it just boils down to the fact that Burning Shadows is a little bit older than Hidden Fates, and so therefore you're seeing a higher value on that hyper rare Charizard GX versus the shiny Charizard, even though, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, Hidden Fates much better set than that of Burning Shadows. And all in all, probably a better chase card with that shiny Charizard GX versus the Burning Shadows. And it also has to do with the difficulty in obtaining products for Hidden Fates versus Burning Shadows. And that's another thing that I'm going to get into here shortly. But that's just kind of a breakdown. I wanted to kind of use those two cards as a side-by-side comparison before we actually jump into some of the characteristics that I'm going to be looking at to come up with my predictions on what these Champions Path Charizards are going to be going for. So now that we've gone through a breakdown of what some of those other cards from the past have gone for, their initial release, what they're going for now in their raw and ungraded form, I want to jump into some of the characteristics that I've been looking at to kind of come up with my predictions on what I think the Champions Path Charizards are going to go for, and ultimately which one I think is going to be more valuable. The first characteristic that I've been looking at, and when I compare these cards from the past, is that we have to consider that the cards from the past, so the Hyper Rare Charizard GX and the Shiny Charizard GX, they came from separate sets and were about 2 years apart. So the unique factor in the Champions Path set is that you have these two Charizards in the same set. And in the past, when you had that gap, when you had those essentially 2 years apart from each other, you have time to build up hype for that card. And realistically, when you only have one Charizard in the set, it builds up that hype even more because that's the one chase card in the set. In this case with Champions Path, since we have two Charizards, it's going to be a lot more difficult to kind of differentiate as to which one is going to be more valuable because they're both in the same set. So that's one thing that I've been considering here as I'm coming up with my prediction on their overall value. You don't really have that time to build up the hype for both cards. You don't have one card in one set and the other card in maybe a later set. So just something to keep in mind here, and kind of how I've come up with my valuation on these cards versus other Charizards that are similar to them in the past. The other big characteristic that I've been taking into consideration is the overall set quality. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I think Champions Path is going to be a great set. As I've said before, I love the fact that you've got two Charizards in the set. I love the fact that it's a smaller set, very similar to Shining Legends. Personally, I'm a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of the larger sets, big sets like Cosmic Eclipse that have well over 200 cards. It makes it much less attainable. So this is one thing that we've got to keep in mind here. And even though Champions Path I think is going to be great, I still don't think that it is overall as good of a quality of set as Hidden Fates. And, just considering the big subset of shinies that you had in Hidden Fates on top of the shiny Charizard GX, I think is a big factor in ultimately valuating that particular card from that set and that particular chase card, and ultimately driving up the price of that Charizard in the set. Burning Shadows, also a great set, lots of great cards in there as well. Obviously, it's a much larger set than what we received in Hidden Fates or with Champion's Path, but there's still a lot of great cards in there. And so that's something else that you have to take into consideration here is the overall set quality and how that helps to drive up the value of those Charizards in the set. And then the last big characteristic that I've been looking at is the type of products that are being released for this particular set and the difficulty of pulling these Charizards based upon those products. So what I mean by that is, let's take a set like Burning Shadows. That was just a regular set. It wasn't a holiday set. It wasn't a subset, anything like that. And so you had products like booster boxes where you could go out, you could buy a booster box. You've got 36 packs in there. So you got a much higher chance of pulling that Hyper Rare Charizard GX from a product that has 36 packs in it versus a set like Hidden Fates where you could only get the tins, maybe a pin collection, or the Elite Trainer box. So maybe you're maxed out at 10 packs in that one product. So the difficulty of being able to pull that particular Charizard or Chase card is going to be much harder because you're ultimately going to have to spend more money to try to garner those packs to try to increase your chances of pulling that card. And really, it's the same thing here with the Champion's Path set. It is a holiday set, much like Hidden Fates. And, we've got the Elite Trainer box and we've got the pin collections. We don't have booster boxes. We don't have that higher quantity of packs that ultimately increase our chances of pulling that card. So I think that's something that you have to take into consideration here. And I think that's why when you look back at these sets, you look at Hidden Fates, you look at Burning Shadows, you look at those two Charizards that were in the set, I think that's why you see the difference in overall value, especially upon its initial release. That's why you saw the Shiny Charizard GX go for a much higher value at its initial release versus the Hyper Rare Charizard GX, because it was much more difficult to come by based upon the products in that particular set. And I think we have to take that into consideration as well when we're looking at Champion's Path. So with that all being said, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into my predictions for these Champion's Path Charizards and what I think their overall value is going to be. Now, I'm going to break it down into 3 categories. Just as before, I'm going to give you my prediction for what I think the price is going to be at its initial release, what I think the price will settle at, within, let's say, 3 to 6 months, and then what I think the card is going to be going for in a PSA 10. Now, keep in mind, guys, these are just predictions, just speculation. These are not hard and fast numbers, just simply what I think these particular cards are going to be going for based upon the characteristics that I've just spoken about. So let's go ahead and start things off with the Hyper Rare Charizard V-MAX. So with this card, I am predicting that its initial release value will be going for $400 on the open market. And the reason that I valued it above the initial release price of the Hyper Rare Charizard GX is, like I said before, the Hyper Rare Charizard GX came out in Burning Shadows, which you could purchase that in a booster box. You had a much higher chance of pulling that card from those 36 packs, whereas with the Hyper Rare Charizard V-MAX, since we're only getting that in Elite Trainer boxes, pin collections, and that's pretty much it, then I think it's going to be much more difficult to try to pull this card versus the Hyper Rare Charizard GX, and so that's why I'm valuating it at $400 versus the $250 that the Hyper Rare Charizard GX went for. Now, with that being said, I think the card, after about 3 to 6 months, I think it will settle in at about $300 on the open market. So, a decrease of about $300. And as I said before, I don't recommend that you guys go out and purchase these right when they hit the open market, because they are going to hit at a premium. And that premium is going to be, in my opinion, about $400. And then it should settle in at about $300, 3 to 6 months from now. Now, in a PSA 10, I think this card is going to be going for $900 when we start seeing these released on the open market. Obviously, it's going to take some time for this to happen because with the release being next Friday, September 25th, it's going to take time for people to not only pull the card, but have it sent off to some type of grading service, in this case PSA, and for that card to come back and for it to actually come back in a PSA 10. So it's going to take a while for that to happen, but I think when you start seeing these cards on the open market, especially in a PSA 10, I think it's going to be going for around $900. So now that we've discussed the hyper rare Charizard V-MAX, let's go ahead and move to the other Charizard coming from Champions Path, and that is the shiny Charizard V. And my prediction for this card's initial release value, I'm putting it at $600 when this card comes out on the open market. Now that is slightly more than what the shiny Charizard GX was initially going for from Hidden Fates. And I think the reason being is that we've moved into an age of Pokemon now where there's so many people who have flooded into the market. I think that is going to drive up the price slightly more, and that premium is going to be slightly more than what you saw with the shiny Charizard GX. It's not much, it's about $100 difference in my opinion, but I think just based upon everything that has gone on this year, the amount of people that are entering the hobby, I think you're going to see that increase that overall value of this particular shiny Charizard. Now, I think the card will settle in again about $100 decrease in 3 to 6 months from now at about $500. But when you start seeing this card come out on the open market in a PSA 10, which, as I said before, is going to take a little time, I think in a PSA 10, you're going to see this card go for about $1,100. Now, I do think that when compared to the shiny Charizard GX, over time, I don't think that you're going to see the same increase in value that you did with the shiny Charizard GX, just because, you know, based upon the characteristics we talked about before, I don't think Champions Path overall has the same kind of set quality that Hidden Fates did. And so I don't think over the long term you're going to see the same kind of increase in value that you have with that shiny Charizard GX. But I still think you're going to be seeing a really nice value from this card. I think it'll settle in at around $1,100 in that PSA 10. Now, a year from now, especially next year being the 25th anniversary of Pokemon, I think you're going to see a lot of cards increase in value. And so you may see this, you know, by this time next year, maybe up around that $1,500 to even $2,000 range. But between the two Charizards, as you guys can see, I'm going to go with the shiny Charizard V as my choice as the more valuable card from Champions Path, both upon its initial release as well as in its overall long-term value. I think shiny Charizard V is going to be the winner in this little competition, if you will. But yeah, guys, that is my prediction for these Charizards from Champions Path. I would love to hear from all of you, and I would love to hear your predictions as well. And this is actually something that I'm considering doing in the future, in future videos when we have a new set coming out, especially if there's going to be a Charizard in there. I think it's fun to just kind of give predictions, give a little bit of speculation on what I think that chase card is going to be going for when it hits the open market and kind of its long-term value, and just kind of see how close I actually am. And as I said, I would love to get input from you guys so that we can all kind of put our predictions together and ultimately see who comes out the closest in this overall valuation. So that is going to do it for today, guys. Thank you for coming back each and every week. I appreciate all of your support. I literally could not do this without all of you, and I can't thank you enough. Other than that, guys, I will see you all next time. My name is PokéNav. I'm here to help you navigate the world of Pokemon one video at a time, and I will see you all in the next video.